Hello everyone, and this will be the first van build update video. I've made some notes, so this one should be a little bit more structured. And let's first start with the van itself. So what I've bought and why. Let's clear it up front. So I have Opel Vivaro from 2010. It has 2-liter engine, 270,000 kilometers stand on the odometer right now, but it is in a pretty good shape, in a pretty good condition. The interior is not that ruined for such a mileage, and also the engine is going good. All the tests are good. There are no internal errors, no major scratches from the outside, few painted elements, but that's fine. Basically this all doesn't matter. I would say that the chassis, the engine, the suspension, the brakes, it's good. It's enough for me. First of all, why I've chosen this car. Basically I didn't have much choice. I had a huge budget restraints, so I was able to spend just exact amount of money, plus minus a few euros, but in this limit I couldn't afford anything high top. I couldn't afford Sprinter, even Transporter was kind of on the edge, but that was still possible. But basically, looking over the models, my choice was over Ford Transit, also not without high top, Opel Vivaro or Renault Traffic or Nissan Primemaster, this is all the same, and Mercedes Vito. So Mercedes Vito was too small. Volkswagen Transporter, it's a good car, but the shape of the van itself, it is too more curved and it is too more rounded. So, and also it's a bit more expensive while purchasing, and in my region it was quite hard to find a van with the 2 front chairs, so I'll be able to go back inside the cargo van between the chairs, and also in a relatively good condition with a more or less fresh year, maybe around 2010, and also for the price that I was looking for. With the Ford, it was even more complex to find a suitable car in my budget. So basically my choice was almost eliminated just by the market in the area where I live. So the only challenge I had is to find a Opel Vivaro with a relatively good condition, with the 2 front seats. I was looking for the long version, so I will have some additional extra space on the back. And after looking up for a few options, after checking few alternatives, I found a relatively good car. I think I made a good deal out of it. So that's the very first video with the van. I purchased it a few days ago, and the only thing I've done so far, I just removed the divider between the cabin and the van itself, and removed some wood paneling which were presented. And let's see, what do we start with? So, pretty empty. When I purchased it and then I just get in, I was really scared, because when you first time see that, you think, oh my god, how am I going to do that? How am I going to convert it into something livable? Because it feels completely empty, cold, and it's frustrating. Now a few days are gone, actually 2 days in total. Now I feel a bit more confident that it's actually possible. Okay, the table of context. Yes, I wanted to make it a bit more structured. So I'll talk about the van itself. This is covered. I'll talk about the work that I have already done. Then I'll talk about the tools that I used for it, and of course the time efforts, and I'll try to touch upon expenses. Let's talk about the build itself. First thing I've done is I looked over the insulation that I can buy in the regular stores in my region. Because I don't have a storage or a garage or a workshop where I can actually work on the van, my only place to work was parking lots and every public area that I can find. So I cannot store all the materials somewhere. And that's why I have some constraints. I cannot rely on the materials that I can buy online, but I cannot store. Or I cannot buy all the variety of all different sizes that are available in the market, but that I cannot buy because they're available only online, or it's present physically just too far away and it doesn't make sense for me to ride there. So first I checked which insulation will I use visiting all the construction stores in my area. I came up with a Knauf 80mm mineral wool, and this one I will use everywhere, also for the flooring, also for the roof and for the walls. The pier panels, for example, the ones that are heavily promoted by one popular guy who's doing sprinter conversion, it is too expensive for me. I just cannot afford of throwing out a few €100 for insulation, and even given the fact that it will be like 2 times better, but it's a few €100 extra. So knowing the height of my insulation, I could buy a wood that I will put on the floor to support the new plywood floor that I will put on top. But the first exercise was to get rid of the original floor that was already present in the car. It took me some time. It was not that easy to unscrew it because some heads of the screws were ruined, so I had to drill this out. There were lots of dust and dirt under it, so I had to do some cleaning. Then the original floor of the van was sometimes not in the best condition, especially when in the places where there were holes. So I had to clean it up with a metal brush and then paint it with a metal paint. Cleanup is mostly done. So we have garbage bags with all the dust, brushes and paper, which helped me with the cleaning. Now it's time to do some small paint job, because we have some pieces of rust where were the holes from the previous floor. So what I'm going to do is cover it with a white metal spray, which doesn't require primer, and brush it with a metal brush first. This one. And then when all the preparations were done, I was ready to start with actually making a floor. First, before that, since I still had a clear surface, I put the aluminum foiled bubble wrap around the wheel arcs. Was way harder than when you see this done on the picture. It took me, I think, 1.5 hours for 2 of them. And then I started to install the wooden bricks to support the further coming plywood floor. I tried to drill the metal of the van as less as possible, so I tried to use as much holes that were done before, and also the original mounts that car already had, instead of drilling new holes or using self-tapping screws. For example, this one, which was used to hold these mounts. So I have a relatively thick piece of wood that I need to mount like this, and I have quite a small screw which actually doesn't fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw the hole for this screw and then expand it for half of the width, so it will fit like this. First I'm going to use relatively small bit just to get the direction. Then I'm going to expand it to 8mm, because this one is 8mm, and then I'm going to expand the gap with this one, so it will have a step somewhere in the middle. And this is how it looks like. So you have a hole which is separated in two parts, the bigger one and the smaller one, and the bigger one is made exactly the way so the screw with the cap will fit inside like this. Speaking about the wooden bars, my strategy was to install the ones which goes by the width of the van using the screws, so they will be completely secure, and also them I will use to fit the plywood floor, and the spacers which will go by the length of the van I will install just by putting the adhesive underneath and screwing it from two sides with the self-tapping screws. So the only places where I had to screw the floor of the van were the places where I had to support the width screws. So I started with the flooring piece by piece. So first of all I will finish the right side and then move to the next section. Here what I need to do is to install the corner plates, so it will go here and also the one on the back, and then install the supporting piece of wood here which will actually support the first floor. Next task was to cut the PVC floor. So the van don't have a perfect shape, right? There are wheel arcs, there are some small elements here and there. There is an entrance zone. So I had to make this curved template and then cut the plywood for the floor. Speaking about the plywood, the original floor was very heavy, and also there was one single piece which is very good to make the floor straight, but very hard to install, especially if you're doing this alone. So my choice was to use 12mm plywood and to cut it into multiple pieces. Keeping in mind that I have a quite extensive support, so I have a lot of wooden bricks which will support my PVC floor, my plywood floor, I thought it's relatively fine to keep it with lots of chunks, and also to make it relatively thin. So 12mm actually is not a lot, but I thought that for my task, keeping in mind the support that I'll provide for it, it will do relatively good job. I used just boxes, paper boxes, which are used for moving from one house to another to make a template. Then I cut a plywood, and actually sometimes from the first, sometimes from the second attempt, I could make a good shape, and that went out pretty well. Another task I picked up before actually securing the plywood floor was to make a hole in the roof for the ventilation. I bought a small fan on AliExpress, and it has two parts, the outer part and the inner part, and they connect to each other. This is also how you can make the length adjustable, so you can put whatever amount of insulation you want and you will still use the same fan. So my task was to make a hole, and it's quite a big one, in the roof. And why I wanted to make this up front is because there will be lots of dust from the metal because of drilling and because of sawing, and I didn't want to do this when the van will be already full of stuff. So I would be able to drill this in, to saw this in, to install it, and then to brush it and to vacuum clean it, and then move all my stuff in, because you don't want to breathe with all the things all the time. Took some time. I drilled lots of holes around, then I used a saw to cut it piece by piece, then I used just some scissors to, how to say this in English? Doesn't matter. You will see the pictures, I'll put them right now, and I think this will give you a pretty good picture how I have done that. So the ventilation was done. I put the insulation between my wooden support tracks. Then I put as much foil tape as I could to completely isolate the floor from the van and from the inner area, so it will be a perfect vapor barrier. Unfortunately, the aluminum tape was over at some moment, and it was already like 3 AM, so Not everything is perfectly covered, but at least all the most important parts, so all the parts which were, I think, which will be the most useful in the van, so where there will be the lots of the most of moisture produced, I think it's covered. I secured the plywood floor. Some way I'll put a picture how it's done. And the only other mandatory part to actually move in and to start was the fence, the one that you see on the back of myself right now. Because you don't want to expose, right, that this is actually not a cargo van, that there you have stuff inside and so on. Also, you need a way to hide yourself since you're going to the stealth mode. And well, I tried to use some pre-made fences, but turned out to be quite expensive. I tried to visit some stores which actually can make fences for you. That's even more expensive. So what I came up with, I just bought this blacked or material actually which doesn't allow the sunlight or whatever light to go through. I think it just has a dark strap inside and then the dark blue cover on the outside. So it costed me like, I think, 15 euros for the size I needed for this one, for left and for right. So I made actually it out of 2 chunks, and it went quite well. Then I just cut it, and I used the gas lighter to make the corners relatively stick, so they will not, flush into small wires all the time. Later on I'm going to sew it, so it will be even better. And then I use just a metal wire to hang it. I think that's the cheapest option you could have, especially when you already have a wire. Okay, my last exercise was to cut the entrance area. So the entrance stepping of the side door. I'll show you the pictures of the video how it looks when it's done around now. And basically that was it. So that was everything I could imagine that was super required, so that really delayed my start. And since this all is done, basically I could move in, and later on, of course, there is lots of work to be done. You can install finished floor, like using PVC or something. You can install, you can put the insulation in the ceiling, on the floor, on the walls, but this all can be done later. You can already start with just spending this amount of time and doing that amount of stuff, or even less. But for me, that was kind of a border. Last 2 pieces: the tools I used for that and the time I used and the time I spent to build it. Well, with the tooling, I have to say that I'm not actually a guy who had nothing, so I had like quite a lot of saws. Let me just showcase. So I have these, I have these, then I have these, then I have these one, then I have this one, and I have 2 more in the toolbox. So basically I had a lot of tools, and this is not just a saws. As you can imagine, like, the man who has this amount of just saws has also quite a lot of other stuff. And yes, that's maybe a benefit I had, that I already had a lot of stuff that will help me. And actually almost everything I had in my toolbox was extremely useful. But this is happening all the time when you do whatever DIY stuff or you're into the hobby. The more stuff you have, the more you know how to use it, the more handy it becomes, and then the easier whatever job you make becomes, because you know, okay, I have this tool which will help me right now, let me pick it up, and then you make it like fast and easy, and you're already used to doing that. Time, efforts, yes guys, and that's the pain. Basically for me, I had 2 weeks to make the build, because I purchased my van in the end of November. I agreed to pick it up and to do all the paperwork in the middle of December, so I'll pay less on the taxation and also on the insurance. So I dedicated myself just 2 weeks, 2-3 full weekends plus 2 Christmas days, and I thought that I will actually fit in those days. However, Sometimes you don't have a mood to work on the van. Sometimes you need to do some urgent stuff for work. Sometimes you have a Christmas dinner organized by your colleague. Sometimes you have you just don't want to work on the van. It's fine, because it's not a mandatory thing. It's a hobby. It's a fun stuff, and even the fact that I gave up with my rented apartment doesn't make a difference. If you don't want something, well, yeah, sometimes it doesn't need to push you to still proceed. So actually, I was working a lot during the night because time was ticking, and when I had full days, not always I had a mood to spend this whole day on the van. So I think overall it took me 5-6 working days, speaking about 8 hours working day, to finish all the tasks that I just explained to you. That's it for now. Of course, there are lots of plans what to do next. My next task for sure is to insulate the walls and then the floor, and this is something that I will start doing right now. So that was today's video. See you next time.